Welcome back to Dungeon Master's Corner. Today, ye will listen to me tale of woe and debauchery, or ye'll be walking the plank. Welcome back to the DM's Corner. I am your host, Brian Scharf, and today we're going to be talking about a story that lives on in infamy with my players. This is a story I like to call Gerblins on the High Seas. So this is about a one-shot idea I had knocking around in my brain, and my players got really excited about it. The entire premise was that all of my players would be playing goblins. I didn't care what their class was, but they were all goblins. And they weren't going to be just any kind of goblins. These were pirate goblins. So they'd have a crummy little ship, an entire crew of, goblins, and a thirst for adventure. I wrote 8 pages of prep. I grabbed a one-shot that took place on the high seas, and I did a ton of research on how to run a nautical campaign. Keep in mind, at this point, the Ghost of Saltmarsh had not been released for Dungeons & Dragons 5e yet. So I settled in for a fun adventure that was sure to take a couple sessions at least to follow through on all these plans I had made. Yeah, so guess what didn't happen? Anything I planned. So, while I don't remember each of their characters, I remember a few names, I remember actions, most of what they did remains a blur to me, and the overall plot of what I wrote is long forgotten. I can tell you this much. There was going to be a mutiny. Now, it was planned. Before the session, Matt, or as you might know him, Scratch, was already planning to overthrow Captain Andrew. Not his goblin name, but Andrew. In fact, he had a daring plan to talk to each crew member, besides Andrew of course, and get them on his side. He had planned on spending half of the one-shot doing that, going in there and trying to turn people to his side. It was clever. It was visionary. It was completely unnecessary. Because almost immediately into the campaign, they found a ship that was captained by a man with a fabulous hat. That's all I can remember about this captain, because it was all that mattered to the goblins. My players, not only were they playing goblins, they were goblins. This was just supposed to showcase that their ship was garbage and they might need an upgrade. But they didn't care about the ship. All they wanted was that hat. So they decided to assault this faster, better equipped, better crewed ship in order to do one thing and one thing only: steal the hat. And while our leveled characters were able to dish out some damage, take out some of their crew, survive the impact of ballista, they also managed to lose about 15 of their 20 crew members. The only ones who survived were the 3 Captain Andrew forced to go below deck and make pizza, something they didn't even know what it was. One was saved from drowning by the only goblin with a conscience, and then there was one of my favorite goblins. Keep in mind, they were all named things like Glurp, Splug, Merc. But this one, this was Sir Grayson Willington Burgomaster III, highly intelligent and refined for a goblin, and was instantly dubbed Wiggleton by the captain and crew to his great dismay. So those were the 5 non-player goblins that survived. Now, to avoid taking further damage, the ship they were pursuing decided to leave them in the foam, and didn't bother to sink their ship or kill every goblin. They didn't care. They're goblins. So they decided to just leave. Now, I had provided these goblins with plot hooks from the 8 pages that I wrote, but not a damn one was followed. Not a damn one was considered. No. They needed that hat. So they decided to overthrow Captain Andrew far earlier than any of them anticipated, including Andrew himself, who knew he would be overthrown at some point. Not because he was in on the plan, but because he knew his chaotic nature would not survive well as a captain. And then they took off to hunt down the ship that had escaped. Because that hat had become their white whale. Now, I was flying by the seat of my pants, because none of this was in anything I had written. None of this was in the module I was running. They were going completely off script. So I grabbed the nearest book that had an island in it, which was the Tomb of Annihilation, and decided that they were close enough to Chult that that was where their quarry had decided to make port. And now, for the rest of the session, I was just making things up on the fly. They decided to sneak on board the ship once they found it, a bunch of goblins trying to not be noticed. Their plan was to get in, kill the captain, and take his hat. Somehow, and even to this day I'm not exactly sure how, but they were successful in their mission. And the night ended as they sailed away into the sunrise, hat on head, and one-shot book not even opened. So my plans had gone completely off the rails, and I never did get to run that one-shot. I will admit to being a little disappointed at that, considering the prep time that went into it, the fact that I had read through the adventure and thought it'd be cool and fun to do. But my players had so much fun with it, and are dying to revisit these characters again in the future. So I guess I'll have my chance to try again. In the end, the game was a success, and that's what mattered. There's nothing wrong with going off the rails, and it's something that every DM needs to be prepared for. I suppose there's no point in crying over wasted prep time, because proper prep time is never wasted. It can always be used later. Until then, I will wait to crack open that one shot, and we get to revisit the Gerblins on the high seas. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Dungeon Master's Corner. If you'd like to support us, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/reliably chaotic, so we can afford to buy ourselves some fancy hats. You can also drop us a line on Twitter at reliably chaotic. We'd love to hear from you.